Michael is now terrified by his father and remorseful for the actions that he himself committed that led to the death of Evan. Perhaps whenever William says that Michael is going to that place again, he's referencing Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria because maybe Michael's trying to figure out what happened to his sister. Like I said, that was speculation, but it makes the most sense to me. Forte from it is that William is now being kicked out of the locations that he helped create by his business partner, Henry. And while Henry was in his right to do so, I mean, he found William with a child scooping animatronic that he built. Like, you can't let that guy keep working around children. Henry becomes paranoid of the idea that William will try to retaliate. During this time, William makes a new animatronic, an animatronic known as the Mechatronic. William will try to retaliate. During this time, William makes a
Okay, Henry makes the animatronic. It's really important to know that. He paused the audio so people will look at the screen.
Known as the marionette or just the puppet. This puppet is designed for the express purpose
So it looks so different.
Henry's daughter Charlotte, also known as Charlie. One day, William, perhaps in the midst of a rage towards his business partner Henry, William decides that he is going to take from Henry what William had accidentally taken from himself. Again, as we can see from many games placed throughout the video game series, one day Charlie is walked outside, to which William Afton pulls up in his vehicle, kills the young child before driving away, and his entire purpose is to follow Charlie around and protect her. However, during this event, it seems that the puppet was trapped and unable to get to Charlie until it was too late. Eventually, the puppet works its way outside in order to find the young girl, which whenever the puppet gets there, the deed has already been done. The puppet, unable to do anything else, lies down next to Charlie, to which it seems through whatever supernatural means is filled throughout this narrative, Spirit Charlie possesses the puppet. Perhaps William killed Charlie outside that day because it was just a moment.
It seems like in FNAF they're aware that a nearby animatronic body close to the time of death allows a soul to be in the thing. That's interesting.
However, despite his efforts, as noted here, Charlie now possesses the marionette. I like the idea of Billy the first murder victim of William, not only because it matches the story more and it makes the purposeful, but in the events that follow, the animatronics are only possessed because the puppet attaches that spirit to each animatronic. So in order for any of the victims to possess future animatronics, the puppet has to be dead first. Not only that, but a line that Henry says in Pizzeria Simulator heavily implies that his child was the first victim of William's killing spree.
Not until I undo what he has done. He a wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this. A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this.
So due to Charlie's death, the restaurant is shut down. A couple years later, it reopens as the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I think it is shortly after the reopening of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that the missing children's incident occurs. For those that don't know, there is a mention in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, and at the time this was the only lore for the overall series that we ever got, in which a newspaper clipping says that 5 children went missing at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and that's the reason it got shut down. That Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that got shut down because 5 children went missing is the current pizza place that I'm talking about in the timeline. And I'll pull the timeline back up in a second to look at, but I want to add the final names to this board first. But in short, we have the original Fredbear's Family Diner, and then we have Baby's Pizza World that opened and get closed, and maybe some other projects that we're not told about in the series. But after Fredbear's, we get Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Charlie is killed outside of it, so it is shut down and now reopened. It is shortly after this reopening, I think the missing children's incident occurs, and here's why. Whenever you are playing as the security guard, a man by the name of Jeremy Fitzgerald in Five Nights at Freddy's, phone guy or the guy who is giving you the instructions instructional new reopened Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
Hello everyone, this is Summer John at the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
And over the course of that week, he says that an investigation is taking place.
Okay, so just to update you, there's been somewhat of an investigation going on. We may have been closed for a few days.
Now, we know that the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, that week that you're playing as the security guard, take place in 1987. Most people say that the missing children's incident happened before the old restaurant was ever shut down, or in other words, around the same time that Charlie was killed. However, that wouldn't make sense if it's a current ongoing investigation. Think about it. If the children disappeared in 1985 and all that time had passed, why would the investigation now just be starting in 1987? We know that the investigation is not over the fight of 87 because that happened at the end of the work week. Also, to make sure everyone's still in the loop, in the original Five Nights at Freddy's game, which takes place after the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, I know there's prequels and sequels all over the place. The phone guy in the first game after the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, I know there's prequels and sequels all over the place. The phone guy in the first game mentions that the old location, the location from Five Nights at Freddy's 2, was shut down due to something known as the Fight of 87, in which an animatronic bit out someone's frontal lobe.
Body can live without the frontal lobe, you know.
So a lot of people say, oh, well, the investigation that's happening over the course of Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is the Fight of 87. But like I said, that
The
happens
frontal
to
lobe?
Jeremy
That's the
Fitzgerald,
visual.
security guard you play as in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 at the end of the work week. So what is the investigation happening over the course of the week itself?
Visual
Well, on
cortex.
the fourth night in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, the phone guy says there's shit happening. On the fifth night, he says that the business is on lockdown. And then finally, on the sixth night, he says that you're not even supposed to be here. Someone used one of the yellow suits in the back, and now none of the animatronics are acting right.
Okay, so just to update you, there's been somewhat of an investigation going on. We may have a few days. Hey, keep a close eye on that, okay? From what I understand, the building on lockdown, no one is allowed in or out, you know, very concerning previous employees. What on earth are you doing there? Did you get the memo? The place is closed down, at least for a while. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, yellow one. Someone used it. Now nothing we're acting right.
We find out in later installments that what had happened during this time is William Afton donned his spring Bonnie or golden bunny suit that he used to wear back at Fredbear's before luring children into the back room and killing them one by one. We don't know William's motives for doing this. Perhaps he was doing it to try to experiment on the same conditions that caused two of his children to possess animatronics, or perhaps it was just an evil bloodlust that served the now death of 3 children in his life. One
I
of
think
them
evil bloodlust is one of the
Either way,
least
5 children were killed,
satisfying
and it seems
explanations
that
for
in order to cover
anything.
his tracks, William stuffed their bodies inside of the animatronics in the building itself.
Pretty sure
I
that people are
believe that
motivated
this
by other
missing children
concerns than
incident,
that.
or in other words, the murder of 5 children, occurred immediately before Five Nights at Freddy's 2. And the investigation phone guy is referring to which at the end of the week he says someone wore one of the yellow suits, and now none of the animatronics are acting right. It's even mentioned at this Five Nights at Freddy's 2 that they trashed the old animatronics and got brand new ones in, known as the toy animatronics. And those old ones seem
I don't know how to
be
make this thing keep focused, to be honest. I'm sorry.
Remember
I
earlier
think it
how I
might be a
said
matter
the
of just
midnight
having
motors were
not a very good
find
angle.
most to occur during Five Nights at Freddy's 2. And the reason William isn't allowed back into the building is because he would have just murdered 5 children. Well, the reason I don't think that's the case is because if you go all the way back to the first game, and again, read the newspaper clipping about the missing children's incident, it says that the suspect who wore the costume has been identified and apprehended. Of course, he was never convicted because they couldn't find the bodies. I don't know why they never checked the creature animatronics, but that's besides the point. So if Midnight Motorist takes place during the investigation of the children that William had murdered, which keep in mind, during the course of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, all happened in the span of about a week. There is no way William would have got to the pizza restaurant and been turned away because he currently would have been in police custody. And also, I know this is being like super hypercritical of specific story moments, which doesn't always work, but I still think it's kind of weird. If William had just murdered 5 children, and this isn't like debatable if he murdered 5 children, this is he was identified and arrested, and they just can't find the bodies to convict him. But it's known by everyone around that William killed those kids. I think him, when he's supposed to be in police custody, coming to the door of the restaurant and then the bouncer being like, hey, you shouldn't be around here. Doesn't that seem like a very like low power push off to a guy who just murdered 5 kids in your restaurant? That sounds much more like William was doing some shady stuff and accidentally killed his own daughter and got kicked out. Not he murdered 5 kids like last week. And again, he should be in police custody at this point. Midnight Motorist happens before the death of Charlie, not during Five Nights at Freddy's 2. You can fight me about it. We find out
You can fight him about it. Wow.
later in the series, but the 5 children who were killed by William Afton during the incident were Gabriel, Fritz, Susie, Jeremy, and Cassidy. And those children were placed into the bodies and subsequently possessed Freddy, Foxy, Chica, Bonnie, and Fredbear, respectively. Now, it's not known if William put the bodies into the animatronics or that indicated in the puppet mini games throughout the series that the puppet, now being possessed by Charlie, went through and attached each of those children to the animatronics themselves. Or more specifically, we know that the puppet was responsible for giving life to these kids. We don't know if that means some more spiritual or metaphorical action, or if the puppet took the murder victims and placed them inside of the animatronics. Either way, the bodies couldn't be found because the bodies of the children were inside of the animatronics themselves. Again, we don't know if the puppet or William did that. Like I said, according to my timeline, this happens immediately before the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 2. So the reason that the animatronics are trying to kill the security guard, Jeremy Fitzgerald, in that game is because 5 of them are possessed by the spirits of children murdered by William Afton. As we see in several of the flashback minigames, William Afton is depicted as a purple figure, also known as Purple Guy, wearing a security badge. So it's more than likely that William gained access to the restaurant and was able to kill these kids and don the spring Barney suit because he pretended to be a security guard and wore the purple security guard vest. This would explain why 5 children who have recently been killed try to kill the first person they see wearing a purple security uniform. The phone guy phone calls that I've mentioned are pretty much the only way that the character gets any world or lore relevance for the first couple games. At the end of the night 6 phone call, phone guy tells Jeremy, again the security guard that you're playing as, that he has one job left to do before the restaurant closes down for a while. That job is he has to watch over a children's birthday party the next day and make sure he wears his purple security uniform and stand very close to the animatronics.
We have one more event scheduled for tomorrow, the birthday. You'll be on day shift. Wear your uniform. Stay close to the animatronics. Make sure they don't hurt anyone.
This causes the event on the final day of the restaurant's opening, known as the Fight of 87, in which one of the animatronics bites Jeremy Fitzgerald, ripping out his frontal lobe. This, as you can imagine, was very bad PR for the company, and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza shut down at the time for good. And then on the 7th night, the final night of the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is open, a new security guard comes in to work only one night by the name of Fritz Smith. Fritz is never mentioned anywhere else in the timeline, although it's weird that in a restaurant where people are actively dying due to the animatronics, some random guy would come in to work one night. For reasons I'm going to explain later, I believe Fritz Smith is an alias for Michael Afton, who is now out and trying to find answers to his father's wrongdoings. The last thing I want to mention before I put the timeline back up is that if you'll notice, Cassidy is said to possess Fredbear. But if you'll also look up here, Evan is also possessing Fredbear. All the animatronics in the series that have been possessed can move around on their own free will except for Fredbear. The primary belief for this is, if you'll remember, the Fredbear costume is both a costume and an animatronic. So if you were to have it set on costume mode and just lay in the corner and someone's to possess that, they can't move and are essentially stuck inside of a decrepit mascot uniform. Whereas all these other ones who are possessed are functioning animatronics and are able to move about on their own free will. In the Five Nights at Freddy's survival logbook, yes, that's a real phrase I just said out loud. Without going into all the specifics, it seems that there is a conversation taking place between two hidden authors on the pages themselves. For example, there will be faded text asking, "Do you remember your name?" and then responses written in the text elsewhere in the book. It's two people having a conversation with each other, and without going into the nitty-gritty of how this was determined, because again, it was a lot. By the way, I didn't mention this enough earlier. Big shout out to Game Theory, also known as MatPat. Like, I understand he has also done the thing his community has done to figure out all of this information, to the point where a lot of the flippant facts that I'm giving you wouldn't be known if it wasn't for his videos. So gotta respect your forerunners that came before you. So again, thank you, MatPat. But due to work mostly done by him, it is determined that there are two souls possessing the Fredbear animatronic. These two souls being Cassidy and Evan, as mentioned earlier. And also they can't move, they're just stuck in a suit talking to each other. So that's, pretty sad. All right, so just to recap everyone to make sure we're on the same page. 1970, William and Henry start Fredbear's Family Diner. In the 80s, the business expands into several restaurants and more of a corporate entity. In 1983 is when the events of FNAF 4 happen, where Michael kills Evan using the mouth of the Fredbear animatronic, and all of the nightmares that Evan had take place during that time. Because of this, William builds the Circus Baby animatronic with the intention to kill and kidnap a child. And I say both in 1983, they were probably in the same year, maybe 1984, whatever. So in 1983, Circus Baby kills Elizabeth. And shortly after that, the events of Midnight Motorist take place, where Henry kicks William out of the business. This causes William to get angry and Henry to get paranoid. So Henry builds the puppet to protect Charlie, or Charlotte, as I have said here, to which William then kills Charlie, and the puppet is possessed by the spirit of Charlie. Because of that, Fredbear and Friends shuts down, and it's later reopened probably around 1985, sometime between 85 and 87, and it's reopened and rebranded as Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. New animatronics are brought in to take the place of the old ones. This is around the same time that the missing children's incident occurs, right before Five Nights at Freddy's 2. So the bodies of the children from the missing children incident, either by William or the puppet, are stuffed into the old animatronics, which leads directly into the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 2. At the end of that week, the bite of 87 occurs, which is when, during the day shift, one of the animatronics bites Jeremy Fitzgerald's frontal lobe out, technically not killing him, because it's mentioned in Five Nights at Freddy's 1 that someone can live without a frontal lobe, but that doesn't mean he lived well or for very long afterwards. I have spring lock failures mentioned here. That doesn't mean directly in 1987. Whenever we get to Five Nights at Freddy's 3, there is a mention on one of the recorded tapes that one of the restaurants was shut down for having several spring lock failures. And then finally, on the final night that the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is open, Michael comes to work as the night guard on night 7 under the alias of Fritz Smith before he is fired when the place is shut down. You good? Did that all make sense? We good? Good, because now I'm on to the first game. No, I'm not kidding. We're now ready to talk about the original Five Nights at Freddy's. Do you see why this is so confusing? People give creators like MatPat and stuff a hard time for this. But like, if you were in it whenever this was happening, you had to just totally guess about everything I just said. because we got rough hints and newspaper clippings as to what happened. Like, yeah, a lot of the theories got kind of ridiculous and out there, but man, there was so much we were filling in the gaps for. So now we are finally to the events of Five Nights at Freddy's 1 occurring in 1993. In it, a security guard by the name of Mike Schmidt gets a night job at the reopened Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. So last time, I'll go through the restaurant, at least for now. We had Fred Bear's Family Diner, which is the one where Evan got his head chopped and then that shut down. We had Fredbear and Friends, which is the one where Charlie was murdered outside of, and that got shut down. We then had Freddy Fazbear's Pizza open, which is where 5 children were murdered, and one security guard had the front part of his brain taken out, and that was shut down. And now finally, we have Freddy Fazbear's Pizza reopening, and Michael working as the security guard. The reason I'm so confident in saying that Michael is Mike Schmidt is because, for one, Mike's name is Mike. And also, in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 and Five Nights at Freddy's 1, whenever Fritz and Mike are fired, on the pink fire slip, it says that they were fired due to odor. While this probably started out as just a joke in the first one, I think it is a bit of a clue in to tell us that this is the same person. And also, it makes the most sense for a storyline. Because if these guys aren't Michael, then in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, some random guy showed up for one night to fight for his life against animatronics and then never showed up again. And then in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, you have a guy who is almost being murdered by animatronics every night he's working there, but then comes back to work the next day. It only makes sense to me if this is Michael who is braving these horrors in order to try to right his father's wrongs or to figure out what happened to his father.